From mysterious roommates who vanish without a trace, to hostels with rooms that shouldn't exist, to encounters that blur the line between the living and the dead. These stories come from real people who lived through experiences that changed them forever. So dim the lights, settle in, and prepare yourself for true scary hostel stories that will make you question what really lurks in those shadowy corners of budget accommodations around the world. I've been staying in hostels for 8 years, across 43 countries. I have loyalty programs with booking sites, relationships with hostel chains, and a reputation as a reliable guest who leaves positive reviews. But nothing in my extensive travel experience prepared me for what I discovered about my own booking history. It started with a simple mistake. I was in Budapest, trying to book accommodation for my next stop in Vienna, when I accidentally searched for my past reservations instead of available rooms. The list that came up confused me. It showed stays at hostels I'd never heard of in cities I'd never visited. The Riverside Hostel in Bratislava, where I'd apparently stayed for 4 nights in March. The Moonlight Backpackers in Zagreb, where I'd checked in for a week in June. The Cobblestone Inn in Ljubljana, where I'd supposedly written a glowing review about the life-changing experience and couldn't wait to return. I'd never been to any of these cities. I'd never even considered visiting them. I called the booking site's customer service, assuming it was a technical error. The representative, after checking my account thoroughly, confirmed that all the bookings were legitimate. Credit card charges, confirmation emails, even reviews written from my account. Everything appeared authentic. Perhaps you made these bookings while intoxicated, the representative suggested helpfully. Or maybe someone else has access to your account. But I knew that wasn't the case. I'm meticulous about my travel planning, and I'd changed my passwords recently. More disturbing was the pattern I noticed in the bookings. They weren't random destinations. They formed a perfect circle around Central Europe, with each stay exactly 1 week long, and each occurring during periods when I'd actually been in completely different parts of the world. According to my booking history, I'd been simultaneously staying at hostels in Eastern Europe, while backpacking through Southeast Asia. I'd been reviewing accommodations in the Balkans, while camping in Patagonia. It was as if there were 2 versions of me traveling at the same time. Curious and increasingly disturbed, I decided to investigate. I booked a flight to Bratislava and headed to the Riverside Hostel, where I'd supposedly stayed in March. The hostel was easy to find, a converted warehouse building along the Danube, with a modern reception area and the kind of international atmosphere I usually loved. But the moment I walked in, I felt a chill of recognition. I'd never been there before, yet everything felt familiar. Alex Chen, the receptionist, called out before I'd even reached the desk. "Back again. How was your trip to Thailand?" I stared at her in confusion. "I'm sorry, but I think you have me confused with someone else. I've never been here before." Her smile faltered. "But you were here in March. Room 6, bed. You stayed 4 nights and wrote a lovely review about our breakfast buffet." She pulled up my booking record on her computer, showing photos I'd never taken, reviews I'd never written, and even security footage of me checking in and out. But the person in the footage, while identical to me in every physical way, moved differently, spoke differently, smiled in a way I'd never seen in my own mirror. "That's not me," I said, watching the footage with growing horror. "Don't be silly," she laughed. "You even mentioned your blog about budget travel in Southeast Asia. You showed us photos from your trip to Cambodia." But I'd never been to Cambodia, and I'd never mentioned having a blog, because I didn't have one. "Can I see the room where I stayed?" I asked. Room 6 was a standard 8-bed dormitory, but bed B had been left exactly as I'd supposedly left it. My travel journal was still on the nightstand, filled with handwriting that looked like mine but described experiences I'd never had. My favorite t-shirt hung from the bed rail, though I was wearing that same shirt right now. The journal entries were detailed and personal, describing conversations with fellow travelers, local food recommendations, and emotional reflections on solo travel that sounded exactly like things I would write. But they documented a week in Bratislava that I'd never experienced. March 15th. Arrived in Bratislava feeling exhausted but excited. The hostel is perfect, clean, friendly, exactly what I needed after the intensity of Bangkok. Can't wait to explore the castle tomorrow. But on March 15th, I'd been in Laos, nowhere near Bangkok or Bratislava. March 17th, met an interesting girl from Germany today. Sarah, traveling solo like me. She's been on the road for 6 months and has some incredible stories. We're planning to visit the local markets tomorrow. March 19th, last night in Bratislava. This place has changed me somehow. I feel like I'm seeing the world differently, understanding my place in it better. I don't want to leave, but Vienna is calling. The entries continued, but they weren't just travel observations. They were intimate thoughts about loneliness, purpose, and the search for meaning that I'd never shared with anyone. Yet they were written in my hand, expressing my deepest fears and desires with perfect accuracy. At the bottom of the final entry, in my handwriting was a single line that made my blood freeze. I think I'm starting to remember. I confronted the receptionist again, demanding to see the manager. While I waited, I checked the hostel's social media accounts and found dozens of photos of me at the breakfast buffet, exploring Bratislava Castle, laughing with other travelers in the common room. I was tagged in posts, mentioned in other guests' reviews, and appeared in group photos that I had no memory of being in. The manager, a friendly Slovak man named Peter, greeted me like an old friend. "Alex, what brings you back so soon? I thought you were heading to Vienna and then Munich." "I was never here before today," I said firmly. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but..." Peter's expression grew concerned. "Alex, we had this conversation before. You were worried about your memory, remember? You mentioned having blackouts, gaps in your travel timeline." "I don't have blackouts. You showed me your travel blog," Peter continued gently. "The one where you documented your journey through Eastern Europe. You were proud of the photos you'd taken here." He pulled up a website on his computer, a travel blog written by Alex Chen, with my photo and bio, chronicling a journey through the exact cities where I'd supposedly been staying. The writing style was mine. The photographs showed me in places I'd never been, and the dates corresponded perfectly with my mysterious booking history. But I'd never created a blog. I'd never been to these places. I'd never taken these photos. "This is impossible," I whispered, scrolling through posts that documented months of travel I'd never experienced. "Memory can be tricky," Peter said sympathetically. "Especially when you're traveling solo for long periods. The brain sometimes fills in gaps, creates false memories. It's more common than you think." But I knew this wasn't false memory. This was something else entirely. I left Bratislava that afternoon, shaken and confused. But instead of returning home, I decided to visit the other hostels on my mysterious booking list. I needed to understand what was happening to me. Zagreb was the same. The staff at Moonlight Backpackers knew me, had photos of me, could describe conversations we'd had and experiences I'd supposedly shared. According to them, I'd spent a week there in June, during which I'd been particularly interested in the hostel's history and the stories of other travelers who'd stayed there. "You kept asking about guests who'd been here multiple times," the manager told me. "You seemed fascinated by the idea of repeat visitors. People who came back to the same places over and over." "Did I say why?" "You mentioned feeling like you'd been here before, even though it was your first time. You joked about having a doppelganger who was visiting all the same places." "In Ljubljana at the Cobblestone Inn." The pattern continued. "Matt here. I discovered something that made everything worse. In the guest book, I found not just one entry from my supposed visit, but dozens, spanning the past 3 years. Each entry was dated differently, but they were all signed by Alex Chen from Singapore, all in my handwriting, but describing different experiences, different emotions, different reasons for traveling. "You're one of our most frequent guests," the owner told me. "You've been coming here every few months for years. Usually stay about a week, always in room 12. You always say the same thing when you leave. I'll be back, but I probably won't remember this visit." "What do you mean?" "You told us about your condition, the memory problems. You said you travel to cope with the gaps in your recollection. That movement helps you feel real even when you can't remember being anywhere." I flipped through the guest book, finding entry after entry in my handwriting. Alex Chen, Singapore, 3rd time here, but feels like the first. The staff are kind about my memory issues. Alex Chen, Singapore, still searching for something I can't name. This place feels like home. Alex Chen, Singapore, the dreams are getting stronger. Sometimes I remember things that happened to someone else. Alex Chen, Singapore, I think there are multiple versions of me traveling. I meet other guests who remember meeting me before, but I never remember them. The final entry, dated just 2 weeks ago, was different. Alex Chen, Singapore, I'm starting to understand what's happening. We're not the same person. We're echoes, reflections, variations on a theme. The original is still out there somewhere, but we're the copies who got left behind in the places he visited. We exist in the spaces between his memories. I stared at the entry, written in my own hand but describing a reality I couldn't accept. Yet as I stood there, I began to remember fragments, flashes of conversations I'd had in this very lobby. Memories of sleeping in room 12, vague recollections of writing in this guest book. But these weren't my memories. They belonged to someone else who looked exactly like me. That night I stayed in room 12, not because I wanted to, but because I felt compelled to. The room was exactly as I remembered it, but that was impossible, because I'd never been there before. Around midnight I woke to find someone sitting at the desk in the corner. A man who looked exactly like me, but older somehow, more tired. He was writing in a journal, completely absorbed in his task. "You're awake," he said without looking up. "I was wondering when you'd start remembering." "Who are you?" I whispered. "I'm Alex Chen from Singapore," he replied. "Just like you, just like the others." "Others?" He gestured to the beds around us, and I saw that they were all occupied. 7 figures, all identical to me, all sleeping peacefully, all wearing clothes I owned, carrying bags I recognized. "We're the ones who got left behind." The writing, Alex explained. Every time the original Alex visits a new place, stays in a new hostel, makes new memories, some of those experiences don't stick to him. They stick to the place instead, and eventually they form into us. That's impossible. Is it? You've been a frequent traveler for 8 years, Alex. 43 countries, hundreds of hostels. You move so fast, experience so much, that pieces of yourself get scattered along the way. We're those pieces, given form and memory. One of the sleeping figures stirred, opening eyes that were identical to mine. "Is this the new one?" he asked. "The newest," the writing Alex confirmed. "Though he's been building for months. All those mystery bookings, all those reviews and photos he doesn't remember. That was us, living out the experiences he couldn't fully process." "Why?" I asked. "Because the original Alex is running from something," another voice said. I turned to see a third version of myself sitting up in bed. "He travels compulsively, never staying anywhere long enough to form real connections. He's afraid of being alone with his thoughts, so he fills his life with constant movement. But movement without meaning leaves traces," added the fourth Alex. "Emotional residue that has to go somewhere. We're the repository for all the experiences he can't integrate, all the feelings he won't acknowledge. The loneliness," said the fifth Alex. The fear that he's wasting his life running from place to place. The desperate hope that the next destination will be different, added the sixth. That he'll finally find what he's looking for. The growing suspicion that what he's looking for isn't a place at all, concluded the seventh. As they spoke, I felt myself fragmenting. The boundaries between me and them began to blur, and I realized that I wasn't the original Alex either. I was just another echo, another partial self who had convinced himself he was the real thing. How do I get back to being whole? I asked. The writing Alex finally looked up from his journal. You don't. None of us do. The original Alex is still out there somewhere. Probably booking his next flight. Planning his next adventure. He'll keep moving, keep running, and we'll keep being created in his wake. But we have a choice, said the second Alex. We can accept what we are, or we can try to become real ourselves. What does that mean? It means staying in one place long enough to build genuine connections. It means facing the loneliness instead of running from it. It means choosing to be more than just an echo of someone else's unprocessed experiences. I looked around the room at my 7 doppelgangers, all living out fragments of a life I thought was mine. The horror of it was overwhelming. But there was also a strange comfort in knowing I wasn't alone in my confusion. The original Alex will never remember us, the writing Alex said, returning to his journal. But we can choose to remember ourselves. When I woke the next morning, I was alone in room 12. The other beds were empty, perfectly made, as if no one had slept in them. But on the desk I found a journal entry written in my handwriting. I've decided to stop running. The echoes of myself that I meet in hostels around the world are teaching me something important. Motion without purpose is just another form of standing still. I'm going to stay in Ljubljana for a while. Get to know the city properly. Maybe even the people. I'm going to try being a person instead of just a traveler. As I read these words, I felt something shift inside me. The compulsive need to move, to book the next flight, to escape to the next destination. It was still there, but quieter now. For the first time in years, I wanted to stay somewhere long enough to understand it. I've been in Ljubljana for 3 months now. I have an apartment, a job at the Cobblestone Inn, and I'm slowly learning Slovenian. The original Alex Chen is still out there somewhere, still running from hostel to hostel, still leaving pieces of himself behind. But I'm not him anymore. I'm something new, a fragment that chose to become whole, an echo that decided to make its own sound. Sometimes other travelers come to the inn and remind me of myself, or of the person I used to be. Restless souls moving from place to place, searching for something they can't name. I want to warn them about what happens when you travel too fast, too far, without ever stopping to process what you've experienced. But I know they wouldn't listen. Just like I didn't listen when I was still running. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you've ever found evidence of trips you don't remember taking or bookings you never made, consider this. Maybe it's time to stop moving long enough to catch up with yourself. Because the person you're running from isn't behind you. They're scattered across every hostel, every city, every country you've visited without truly seeing. And they're all waiting for you to come home.